and I'm Dean of the L. Douglas Wilder School of Government and Public Affairs here at Virginia Commonwealth University. And it is indeed my pleasure to welcome you to the second panel of our full-day symposium that's examining 30 years of the 30th anniversary of Governor Wilder's historic inauguration. We are so pleased to be joined in this endeavor with our partners at Virginia Union University, who have been co-planners and co-hosts with us of this event. We also want to take a moment to thank our sponsors. With their generous support, we are able to offer this full day of programming at no charge for all individuals to participate. You see the patron sponsors in front of you. And we also want to thank our session sponsor, Virginia is for Lovers, and our presenting sponsor, Dominion Energy. Actions speak louder. So we're indeed really pleased to have our sponsors. So I would like to start opening this session by saying this session is going to be, I know, very, very informative, and it will take us down a trip down memory lane with many individuals who served and worked very closely with Governor Wilder across the years. So I know that we're going to learn some historical artifacts and tidbits, and very much looking forward to learning. I will say to everyone, this is a virtual symposium. I'm sure many folks are saying that the inauguration happened in January. We're doing this celebration here in September. We originally had planned for this to be an in-person event on the campus of Virginia Union in the spring, but because of the coronavirus, we had to postpone that. And then we decided, as the virus continued to go on, that we did not want to close the year out without stopping to recognize and commemorate the legacy of Governor Wilder. And so thank you so much for joining us for this virtual full-day symposium. For today's session, we'll spend the next 90 minutes discussing the judicial and legislative history of the Wilder administration and indeed Governor Wilder's career. I am pleased to introduce the moderator of this session, James Dyke, who currently serves as a senior advisor for McGuire Woods Consulting. But Secretary Dyke was also Secretary of Education in Governor Wilder's administration, and Secretary Dyke was the first African-American Secretary of Education in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Secretary Dyke is a senior advisor at McGuire Woods, and his broad practice covers corporate, legislative, education, government relations, and municipal law. Prior to becoming a partner at McGuire Woods, he was also a partner at Hutton and Williams law firm. Starting with Governor Robb in 1984, Secretary Dyke has been appointed to a board or a commission by every governor, Democrat or Republican, since. So I think that speaks volumes to the respect that Secretary Dyke has across the spectrum. He served on numerous local, state, and national boards, and not surprisingly, Secretary Dyke was named to Virginia Business Magazine's list of most influential Virginians. All 9 years the list has been issued. Quite an accomplishment indeed. He is currently serving on the Board of Visitors at Norfolk State University and Marymount University. Secretary Dyke shares his alma mater of Howard University Law School with Governor Wilder and served as a law clerk to the Honorable late Spotswood Robinson III of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia. Secretary Dyke, thank you so much for moderating this session, and I'm going to turn it over to you to introduce the panelists and to proceed with the session. Secretary Dyke.
Thanks very much, Susan. I really appreciate it, and it's been an exciting morning already hearing from the governor. So I think we've set a pretty high mark here, but we've got a great panel, and I'm really looking forward to it today. Before I introduce the three panel members, I did want to set a little context for what we're going to be doing today. Several months ago, all of us, I think, learned that the state library had not yet cataloged the records of the Wilder administration. The result of that is that many scholars and others have not had full access to the records, and the people have not been made fully aware of the many positive steps that were taken during the Wilder administration. Governor Wilder has long said, "He who tooteth not his own horn may have that horn go untooted." Our goal today is to toot the Wilder horn as it relates to legal, legislative, and policy matters that began during his administration. People need to understand the unique situation is that Virginia is the only state where governors cannot succeed themselves. They only serve one term. As a result, this means that some of the matters that the governor was involved in were able to come to fruition during his administration, but in other cases, many seeds were planted that have blossomed since then, and some are in fact still in blooming as we speak. That's why it's so important to understand that the Wilder administration at least began those conversations. To address those areas today, we are very, very honored to have three distinguished panel members. First, if you talk about Virginia legal legends, several names pop to mind. Oliver Hill, Spotswood Robinson, Leroy Hassell, and Roger Gregory. And we're pleased to have Judge Gregory join us today. He was formerly a partner in the law firm of Wilder and Gregory. He was the first African-American to sit on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit, which includes Maryland, West Virginia, Virginia, North and South Carolina. He is also now the Chief Judge of that court. Roger is going to discuss how his career has been impacted by Governor Wilder, as well as share some of the key legal developments that have taken place in the past 30 years, since he has been on the bench, but also associated with Governor Wilder. Our second panelist is Verbena Askew, who is a principal attorney at the Verbena Askew law firm. She's a former circuit court judge and former Newport News city attorney. She's been very active in the community, has won a number of different awards, and is currently representing Senator Louise Lucas in litigation related to removal of the Confederate statutes in Portsmouth. Verbena will discuss how the governor has impacted her career, as well as legal developments she has observed that resulted in that impact and reflected. Our third speaker is Walter Mack McFarlane, who, to those of us who've worked with him, he's known as Mack the Knife. Mack served for 21 years in the Attorney General's office, including the last 17 as Deputy Attorney General. He's the former Chief Counsel and Director of Policy for Governor Wilder. Once he completed that position, he then served as Director of the Virginia Department of Correctional Education under 4 governors, and was at the same time a consulting attorney for 3 of those governors. Mack will discuss some legal and policy issues he faced under Governor Wilder that he's seen throughout his legal career, where he's been recognized on numerous occasions for his legal expertise. And with that lead in, I'd like to turn it now to Judge Gregory to share with us his thoughts and views and his experiences with the distinguished Governor Wilder. Judge Gregory?
Good morning, Jim. First of all, thank you so much for moderating this panel. I always say Jim Dyke is one of the smartest people I know. Just incredible. And to Dean Gooden, thank you so much. And to VCU, Virginia Union, being sponsors. I'm honored that this little Petersburg boy would be a part of this incredible celebration for this wonderful career of Governor Wilder. And I'm probably a nerd, but I'm probably the only one to think about this, but it is altogether fitting that we do this on a day, probably not planned, but it just so happened that this is Constitution Day. September 17, 1787, the principal delegates who had hunkered down from May through September in the hot Philadelphia summer came out with a document. Ben Franklin, when asked, "What have you done? What have you wrought?" He says, "You have a republic if you can keep it." And that has been the question, can you keep it? The first problem from the very beginning was in the preamble itself, when it said, "We the people, in order to form a more perfect union, do establish justice." And it goes on to common welfare and liberty. But the first mandate was justice. The problem was, who were we the people? Governor Wilder in his entire career never made the adjustment of acceptance to precepts, policies, and practices of our nation that were in conflict, and sometimes brutally in conflict with those principles. Somehow he always felt that, although not in practice, in his heart, he was included, and that he was an heir to the full promise of liberty and equality. And I believe when we talk about law in Governor Wilder's career, that is probably one of the motivating things to make that document speak and ring truth. And he's dedicated himself for that. And the nation and the Commonwealth are blessed that he ran his stick along the public rail here, and he left his fleece, and still leaving his fleece on our hedges. And singularly, I've been blessed because he chose to toil in the field of law. I met Governor Wilder, then Senator, back in 1973. He was my professor at Virginia State, adjunct. He taught me 2 classes, constitutional law, and the other was civil liberties in the Constitution. It was an eye-opener. I had never known any lawyers growing up in Petersburg, and I would watch him just, sometime when we had an assignment, he would open his book up and I could see court dates. It was very close, seminar type class. I could see his notes and dates, and I was just thinking somewhere in my heart, I said, wow, that'd be awesome to be a lawyer. And 10 years later, we would be law partners. But the point is this, he always insisted that you had to measure up. As a matter of fact, I tell him about this. After I got to law school at the University of Michigan, I saw the exam question. I said, the senator was giving us law school exam questions of the same ilk. But that's the way he pushed it. And that was the sort of just the defining aspect of it. As a law partner, he's unbelievable. You know what, people don't believe this, but it's true. Governor Wilder and I were law partners, and we did not have one thing in writing. It was just like Abraham Lincoln with his law partner, William Herndon. And Lincoln said, I trust you and you can trust me. And that's the relationship we had. And never a cross word. I'm telling you, I learned from his timing in terms of the law and his commitment that everybody counted. It means something. We tried cases almost like sometime like Atticus Finch, in cases where juries, and there were very heated interracial questions, and he was always steady. And sometimes he'd whisper to me, he said, Roger, that's enough when I'm doing direct. Because he knew that magical place where the point of diminishing returns, and I learned that. And even in the courtroom, he knew how to make sure that justice occurred always. I recall we had a case where, and we'd play good guy, bad guy. I would do the direct sometimes on our clients and witnesses, and he would, of course, do the cross. And we had a judge who I won't name. Every witness we put on, he would ask questions. Never any questions to the Commonwealth witness. And I was feeling a little way about that thing. But Senator Governor Wilder just sort of calmly, he had that grip. He has an incredible grip. He gripped my arm and said, don't worry. You know what he's able to do? In closing argument, he turned that into a jewel. He told the jury, he said, not only did our witnesses withstand any test of cross-examination by the prosecution, but every one of them underwent the judge's examination, and they were unscathed, and they were, so you see, the timing was unbelievable. And you know, at the end of the day, we would sit down and talk, and he would talk in terms of verse and prose, and we talk about Cicero, what was going on in the General Assembly, and how his mind was just a steel trap. And I just learned and over, and I know it, in our office, we had a laminated plaque out there for the clients to come in, and it said, Abraham Lincoln's picture was on it, it said that a lawyer's only stock in trade is his time and advice. I guess maybe that was a reminder that you had to pay for this advice, but more importantly, he was always elevating our practice, that you're coming to a law firm and we are giving you advice, and that's important, and we take that seriously, as Lincoln did for all of his clients. And it just, Governor Wilder always had a sense that he knew, not for some haughty way of greatness, but he always pushed forward to an excellence and demanded of everyone. And and I tell you, it meant a lot. And I wouldn't be on the Court of Appeals if it wasn't for Governor Wilder. You know, some people don't understand what real humility is. Real humility is strength, because it lets people know, and you know, that it's not about me, it's not because of me. It may be for me, but it's not from me. And Governor Wilder, he's the one that my name, and then what, more than just putting my name up, and we could tell some stories, and one day if I wrote a book about it, you would hear them. He went to bed in many times in halls and places that I could not tread, but his character and his courage could. And that's why I'm there. And every day I tell my law clerks stories that I've learned about trying cases that came from him. And if, mind you, if there's any luminous quality in my career or anything I've done, if it is, it's not the lamps that he lit and that reflect directly on those things and the seeds he sowed in me. You know, as Governor Wilder built, and the rainy day fund and buildings and expansions, but you know what? His real legacy to me is like what Henry Brougham said about when he was talking about Caesar Augustus. See, Augustus built many temples, and Temple of Jupiter and Athena and all these wonderful temples. And his boast was, he said, when I came to Rome, I found it made of brick. But when I left it, it was made of marble. But how much more is the boast of Governor Wilder? To say beyond that, to say that when I came, I found the law. The law was a sealed book, and I left it a living letter. The law was the patrimony of the rich, and I left it the inheritance of the poor. The law was a two-edged sword of craft and oppression, and I left it the staff of honesty and the shield of innocence. That's the boast. That's the love that he had about the law and the impact. And as Thurgood Marshall said in one of his last speeches during the end of his life, Governor Wilder epitomized that. He said the law can sometimes tear down walls. And Governor Wilder tore down a lot of laws of discrimination and injustice. He said the law can open up doors. Yes, he opened up a lot of doors for opportunity. Believe me, I just told you, I stepped through that door and still walking through that door, and every day grateful for that. And to the extent that I owe something, I owe a lot of debt of gratitude, but more importantly, I owe it to the people to administer justice without fear or favor in the Constitution, that it speaks to everybody, rich, poor, black, white, whatever your religion is, whatever the stripe, whether you've been an American for 50 years or 5 days or undocumented. And that's the fresh breath of justice that he instilled in me, and always go forward. And as I think he quoted before, in terms of, he often quotes about, know that you're right, then proceed. A lot of people think that they skip the most important word. They say, oh, I know I'm right. He said, I'm being right, and then I'm proceeding. The most important word is to know. And that know comes from hard work, from experience. It's like Justice Holmes said, that the life of the law is not logic, it's experience. And Holmes also said, one of my favorite quotes, and I think I'm very thankful that Governor Wilder always did this. Justice Holmes says that he was on a train and the young conductor walked up to him and said, where's your ticket? And he told the conductor, he said, no, the question is not where's my ticket. The question is, where am I going? And that's what Governor Wilder always insisted. People whose ticket wasn't punched, they didn't have everything all documented, everything, all ducks weren't in a row, all the family heirlooms and all the inheritance was not there, and the coffers were bare, but there was a drive to go somewhere. And that's what he did with our nation. He, as Thurgood Marshall said, beyond those walls and windows of opportunity, he built bridges that led us to common ground for public good. And I think that will always be the trademark in terms of law and what he did, and the impact in terms of law. And he was way ahead of the time. with the 1 gun a month bill way back then. It was seismic to get that done with his courage and determination. We're still looking at now with the Heller case recently at the Supreme Court. Finally, it's been settled now. The question was it a militia, right for militia, a well-regulated militia, or private right? Supreme Court says a private right, and when it comes to owning a handgun, at least in your home, it is a fundamental right. Cases in terms of affirmative action now where we are. And Governor Wilder opened many opportunities, and I think the Secretary may talk about that in Mack, so I don't want to get into that. But opportunities in terms of diversity so that the Commonwealth reflected all of her richness, of human richness, every hue and stripe. And that was that. And so we're talking about the law, the Fisher case for affirmative action now. It's tedious as to what will happen, but for right now, and the Fisher case out of Texas, a program where if you graduated in the top 10% of your class from a Texas high school, you could be admitted. And the court said as long as it's narrowly tapered to diversity and not numbers, specific numbers, it met strict scrutiny. So that's where it is in terms of higher education, but that's always very tedious. But he knew all along those things were so important in terms of election laws. Because we have Citizens United, as the governor alluded to this morning. You're right, Governor. Interesting that the corporations now have Fifth Amendment right in terms of self-incrimination, all those things as a person, but it opened the doors in unlimited coffers. And I think the most poignant ones in the areas of voter suppression and those questions of voting rights. Hbcus case says that it was an interesting case that it said that the 1965 Voting Rights Act, one of the biggest things was pre-clearance, but Section 4B, which set forth the formula to determine whether those states that had historically discriminated in voting based on race would still be under that pre-clearance, said that formula was outdated and no longer needed, and there's no proof that it was required. So therefore, with that formula being struck down, that directly impacted Section 5, which it allows the pre-clearance and that before you can implement changing voting polling stations and all of these things. You're going to have incredible impact in terms of Shelby. And then later, Roger comes along and says that partisan gerrymandering is not within the wherewithal of the federal courts to resolve. Therefore, if you gerrymander or redistrict based on trying to advantage yourself over a party, that's not covered. But the point is that a lot of that is determined by how people voted in the last presidential election due to the demographic type of connection with people voting. It's not difficult to find demographic connections with partisanship and demographics. So that's going to be a tedious case. But Governor Wilder was always on the forefront. He was the chairman of the P&E, Privilege and Elections, so writing election laws for Virginia, always on the cutting edge. And he always, as he said, would take up the cudgel and cut away at the morass of injustice, cut away of insensitivity, the dispossessed. And I end by saying, being his law partner and learning at his feet and being a servant of the public, I can think of no greater honor than to be here to celebrate his continuing legacy and work on behalf of all. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you very much, Judge. We appreciate it. Very eloquent. Judge Askew, you're up.
I don't know if I can follow this act. I was very impressed, Judge. I learned a few things myself. I would like to also thank VCU and also for being a part of this program. The first time I met Governor Wilder, he was in the Senate, and it was at an ODU hospitality suite. And I was just so impressed with how quick his reactions and what a quick wit he had about himself. And so I just started to follow him. From then on, I remember following him when he ran for lieutenant governor. Was very impressed with how he ran this campaign. But I'll tell you, when he became governor, we had a young fellow named Allen Iverson, who people know him now because he's playing basketball and was well known. But the only reason that he became successful in the field of basketball was because of Governor Wilder. Governor Wilder had Theophilus Twitty as a deputy within his administration, and he oversees the corrections department. And I think Theophilus Twitty did some research and presented that research regarding what happened to a case involving Allen Iverson in Hampton. And the community was just in an uproar. Of course, it was divided, but it stemmed from Allen Iverson being in a brawl at a bowling alley. And he had just, I believe, received a contract maybe with Nike's, but he pulled up in court when he was charged with 2 felonies in a limousine. And we had a judge at the time that was so upset by that. I think most of the people felt that it was an overkill in what happened to him, but the judge gave him two felony convictions and then immediately put him in jail. And so that was going to interrupt any kind of career that this young man would have. And I thought it was brave of Governor Wilder to just step out there. Now, he had information. I don't think he just did it based on public sentiment, but I know that there was research done as to what happened to this young man, and he granted Allen Iverson clemency. Now, we all know that after that granting of the clemency, the appellate courts overturned the conviction. And as a result, he went to Georgetown, and so he had the mentorship of the coach, the late coach at Georgetown, and then subsequently went on to play professional basketball. And I would say that the governor is responsible for that. It would not have happened if he had not intervened, and we don't know what would have happened to Allen Iverson. So I was real proud that we had a governor to do that and to help the community and to help this young man. I would also tell you that what Governor Wilder has done to impact my life, just generally, he has, in watching him and his way and how he conducts himself, and the fact that he's fearless. He just really doesn't seem to be cowed by anyone from over the years I've seen him. And as a result, in handling cases, I will tell you one of the more difficult cases that I had was a few years ago, and it was in Richmond. It was Johnny Johnson's case. It was against a company that was out of Minnesota. And it was just part of what I learned from the governor as to how you kept going, because there were a lot of things against you. And there were a lot of lawyers in Minnesota and in Richmond, but you just fought for the right thing and continued to do what we thought was in the best interest, really, of this young man who was he just worked hard as a grocer, and just corporate America just came after him. It really was about money, but it was more for him. He just wanted to keep his pride. So I think Governor Wilder influenced me in that regard. I will also tell you that as just an individual, he called me just out of the blue one evening because there was a question the Black Caucus had asked me to run for the Senate seat. And I got a call on my cell, and he said to me, he said, I think you should run because I know you're going to do what's best for the people. you're going to do what's best for the public. And that really is what convinced me to do it, because I'm really not a politician. But I decided to do it because he asked me to. And I said, well, if he has confidence with me, I guess I'll just go and see what we can do. Well, it was a close election. I lost maybe by 135 votes. But I did appreciate his reaching out to me in that regard. His impact also, he's impacted me in how I handle cases on the bench. As a circuit court judge, there were a lot of difficult decisions, not just in the cases themselves, but also in doing administrative things. And when people try to influence you and you know it's the wrong thing you do, I think that the governor had an impact on me in making those difficult decisions, but I always believed they were correct based on what was best for the public. So I appreciate that as well. And frankly, I still just follow him. It's just real important to see that he had a mission always. I mean, when he left being the governor, guess it was people questioning, well, why would he want to be the mayor of the city of Richmond? Well, if you followed what he did, he wanted to make a difference. And he knew that he could. Not many people could. A lot of people take positions because they just want the title. Governor Wilder did it because he wanted to help the people and he wanted to make a difference wherever he went. And I think he's done that. And with that, I will yield to you, Secretary Dyke.
Okay.
Secretary Dyke, you're on mute.
Yeah, thank you very much for those comments. And it was great to see he had a significant impact, and especially on the Iverson case. That was something, not only was it the right thing to do, but as you said, he was able to challenge a statute that was subsequently upheld by the reviewing appeals court to say that this person had been convicted under the statute wrongfully. And it made a big impact, no question about that. I was going to turn to Mack. Is Mack back on with us? Well, I think we're trying to connect with Mack, but in the interim, what I'm going to do is I'll move into some of the things that I had wanted to share with you. You've heard a few of them referenced in the governor's remarks and in some of the introductory remarks about some of the things that got started during his administration that we want to make sure people are aware of, because given the fact that we've not had an opportunity to examine all of his records, people may not be aware of some of the things. And it's sort of ironic that the first thing I'll mention is the state library itself. When we took office, the state library physically was in a stage of ill repair. It was having a lot of physical difficulties. And the governor worked with the General Assembly to put in place a program to, in essence, build a new state library, which, as you know, is now located on Broad Street right next to City Hall. That was something that came to fruition because of Governor Wilder proposing we needed to maintain and improve and replace the state library, which we did. It did not open officially until 1997, but the ball was started under Governor Wilder. And that's something that the city of Richmond was very, very happy about. Another physical structure I want to mention that people may not associate with the governor is the Air and Space Museum at Dulles Airport. During the Wilder administration, the federal government decided that they had a lot of artifacts at the Air and Space Museum in Washington that they could not display because they didn't have room for it. And so they decided they needed to open up an annex and to put it at an airport, which would be large enough to house all these things. And it came down to a decision between whether or not to put it in Denver at the old Stapleton Airport or to put it in Dulles, Virginia. Governor Wilder led the charge, and we worked close with Senator then John Warner to make sure that that particular annex was built at Dulles Airport. And it is now one of the top tourist attractions in the Commonwealth of Virginia. But yet and still, when you visit that, I have yet to see any recognition of the fact that it would not have been there had it not been for Governor Wilder. but those are things that I think people need to know. It's been mentioned that when the Wilder administration took office, we found ourselves $2.5 billion in the hole financially. And the governor got a hold of that, decided that we needed to make some very tough fiscal decisions. And as a result of his stewardship, Virginia was voted not only once, but 2 consecutive years as the best fiscally managed state in the nation. That's because the governor made the tough decisions. He also took advantage of the fact that, given the fact that we were in a budget situation and people knew we had to make reductions, we were able to look at some parts of state government and say, wait a minute, do we really need to be doing these things? Is there some way we can consolidate programs, get rid of some deadwood programs? And so we were able to make some significant changes. He alluded to one when he talked about the student loan program. We had 2 student loan programs operating in Virginia. A couple of blocks away was a duplication of efforts. He moved to consolidate those programs to make sure we had a more efficient system providing student loans to the citizens of the Commonwealth of Virginia. He mentioned the rainy day fund. That's something that is a monument in Virginia, to be perfectly honest with you. And it all goes back to Governor Wilder deciding we needed to set this reserve fund up so governors would have that in the event of a situation that required some significant funding. So that is something that he clearly needs to be recognized for. In addition to consolidating the student loan program, we began and had a task force back in 1991 called Workforce 2000 that focused on the fact that we needed to be concerned about preparing our future workforce. And we looked at the fact that at that point, there were at least 19 different workforce development programs spread throughout Virginia government. And our task force recommended that those programs be consolidated and brought into the governor's office so that there would be some oversight, some more efficiency, some savings of funds, and that we would use our money in a more productive way. That took a while to come to fruition. And it was only during the current administration that Governor Northam took the step of appointing Megan Healy as a cabinet level official to oversee and hopefully bring us toward a consolidation of those programs. That's an idea that started under Governor Wilder. There are a few more things I'd like to mention, but I see that Mack is back online, and I want to kind of reach out and let Mack have an opportunity to share some of his thoughts. Mack, can you hear us? You need to unmute. There you go. You unmuted? Okay.
How about now?
Oh, we can hear you now. As I said,
Good.
Mack tonight was the counsel to the governor and got me out of a few legal scraps as far as it was related to the education secretary. But Mack, why don't you take it away and share with us some of those things you recall from the Wilder administration?
Well, the first thing I think is the fact that the first issue I think you and I both faced was the issue of the overpopulation of the Department of Education. The teachers were complaining and complaining if they couldn't get anything done because of the fact that that there were so many steps they had to go through. There were so many people they had to contact. And so they said it reminded them of Congress. What we did then was to eliminate the deadwood. There was a lot of complaints. In fact, we got it down to the point where it was an incredibly efficient organization. I remember J. Lark had complained that we had not contacted them when we wanted to reorganize. And and I think that you said to them, well, the next time we reorganize education, we'll contact you. So anyway, the other thing that was with education was a disparity lawsuit that Andy Miller, former Attorney General, brought on behalf of Southwest Virginia. And in that instance, Andy was a fabulous attorney. I had the opportunity and privilege to serve as a Deputy Attorney General under him. And he brought the suit in the Circuit Court of the City of Richmond, but he didn't have it served. And if you recall, you and I were directed by the governor to go up there and demand to be served, because one of the things you didn't do was you didn't threaten Governor Wilder. And so you and I remember walking up there, in some way the word got out, and there was a court reporter, or reporters rather, and television cameras following us up there. And we went into the judge's office and asked that we be served. And he said he couldn't believe it, because he'd never had that happen before. That somebody demanded to be entered into a suit like that. And so he did say, well, I'll take it under advisement. I think he talked to his colleagues and finally agreed to allow us to be served. The point was with the case was that Southwest Virginia wanted more funds to be equal to places like Northern Virginia. But the cost of living in Northern Virginia was substantially different than the cost of living in Southwest Virginia. So essentially you could provide teachers and so on in Southwest Virginia for an administration for less money than you would for the prospect of allowing other, like Newport News and so on. They could not have provided the teachers on the salary that Southwest Virginia was providing, because it was just a higher cost of living. And so essentially it turned out that we did prevail in that case. Another one was the Vmi case. And in Vmi, this was a case where from the very beginning, the governor was concerned with the concept of the 14th Amendment and the separate but equal. And he thought that women, and rightfully so, had the right to have the same kind of opportunity as the males at VMI. And so what he did was, when the United States sued Virginia, he didn't want to be a defendant, because that implied that he was supporting the concept of not allowing women into VMI. But he was also concerned about the situation of throwing women into an environment that was very hostile, even for males. And it had to have a strong sense of character to be able to in fact carry on with the traditions and the opportunities that and difficulties that VMI offered. So meantime, we got in touch with Mary Baldwin College, and they were very susceptible to starting a unit for all females. And it turned out that this unit has become very successful, by the way. It's headed by a retired Brigadier General. But at the same time, we wanted to be withdrawn from the lawsuit. And I think your colleague or your friend of yours, Benjamin Civiletti, who was the former Attorney General of the United States, joined as co-counsel with me, and we asked to be withdrawn, and the courts did grant that opportunity to withdraw. The courts, as you recognize or remember, that Justice Ginsburg, they went to the Supreme Court of the United States. Justice Ginsburg wrote an opinion which said essentially that the VMI environment versus the Mary Baldwin environment was not really equal because Mary Baldwin's new, they were just starting. They didn't have a reputation like the VMI cadets did, and so she said that essentially that separate but equal was not going to work with that situation. So she allowed the people or the women to join the ranks of VMI. At the same time, the Mary Baldwin program continued. There was a dissent by Justice Kalea in that case, in which he said he thought that they had changed the criteria from an intermediate scrutiny for sex cases such as this or sexual cases, and that they made it now a strict scrutiny, and so he dissented. Justice Rehnquist wrote agreed with the majority, but he wrote a separate opinion saying that he thought if the VMI, if the Women's Institute had been as equal to VMI, then he would not have joined the majority. The next case was the Roger Coleman case, and I think I'll talk to you about that. Governor Wilder did not like the death penalty. It was not something he enjoyed dealing with. So one of the first things I did was to look at the background. Where from the death chamber they would call the governor's office and connect with a special phone we had set up and ask whether they should carry out the execution. And prior governors would always say with either I'm going to grant clemency or go ahead and carry out the execution. Governor Wilder was not comfortable saying, you carry out the executions. Well, that was not his role. His role was actually I don't have a power to direct the execution. I'm merely letting the flow of the execution. So I choose not to intervene. So subsequently, that's what we did say when we did not want to intervene. We essentially didn't say carry out the execution, but said we do not want to intervene. Then the Roger Coleman case was a very difficult case. He was accused of murdering his sister-in-law. He appealed and was denied, and the primitive DNA we had at the time, it showed that he was within 0.5% of the people who could have carried out the murder. But I also had interviewed the witnesses to 2 other previous crimes with which he had been accused. And one was an attempted rape, and the other for which he was convicted, and the other was one which was not carried through because of the fact he was issued the death penalty, and that was that he was accused of an immoral act in front of the 2 librarians at the Grundy Library. So I thought, well, by interviewing these witnesses and seeing what was actually the truth in those cases, then I'd ask him whether he admitted or denied those cases. Had he admitted those cases, it would have changed our outlook on the death penalty, I think. But he denied both of those cases. And the people that were witnesses were very credible witnesses. So we did not choose to intervene in the case. And Subsequently, he was executed. A great uproar was made. He was being represented by a big law firm in D.C. And a book came out called May God Have Mercy. And in that book, it strongly implied that Governor Wilder was wrong, that in fact he had not committed the crime. Centurion Ministries, who were arguing for him in that case, were very convinced that we were executed or had executed an innocent man. So they put pressure on the future governors, and finally Governor Warner caved in and said that he would allow a new DNA done with the more sophisticated and new DNA that we had at that time. And the A&E television came down, and Centurion Ministry were in the room with them when they were listening or waiting for the results of this new DNA by a very professional organization. And when they were going to basically say, well, boy, Virginia, you sure did screw up on this case because you've executed an innocent man. And as it turned out, when the phone call came in and the information was passed on, there was a collapse in the room because it was the DNA showed there's only one chance in 19 million that he didn't do the murder. So then A&E changed the whole situation to show how Coleman had manipulated the entirety of the Centurion Ministry and all the anti-capital punishment people. And I know that that Warner did not contact Governor Wilder to ask him about going through with the test, and it was almost like a slap in the face that said, "We don't believe you did right." And when it turned out, Governor Wilder was 1,000% right on this case. The interesting thing about these cases, he didn't like the death penalty cases, but I would study these cases for weeks, going through everything. And then I would, when I went in to talk to him about it, he knew as much about the case as I did. It was being an attorney for Governor Wilder was scary because it was like he was so many steps ahead of you. He has an incredible mind and sharp. Oh my goodness. So, it's a little bit of trepidation going in to talk about things that he and discuss things with him. But like I say, I think you all have already said that he's an absolutely brilliant person. One other thing, Jim, before I close out here, I'd like to say he was a different type of, if you use the word, politician. And I know you've seen this, that the politicians come into a room and they are looking for people they can shake hands with and greet. And when they talk to you, they're shaking your hand. You question whether they're really listening to you because they're looking over their shoulder about who they're going to go to next. Governor Wilder was never like that. He would shake your hand. He would listen to you. He would discuss the matter with you. You knew he was listening to you and talking to you. And the last thing I would say is my wife, who recently passed away, thought he was the equivalent of a Southern gentleman. She said, if you looked in a dictionary under Southern gentleman, Governor Wilder's picture would be there. So I think that's very true. So anyway, it was a great honor to talk to be with him and to work with him and to actually have the honor have been appointed as his chief counsel and director of policy.
Well, you did a fabulous job. And as I said, you saved me a few times on the legal side, so we appreciate that. Let me just very quickly, because I'm sensitive to our time, let me just pick up a little bit with some of the other things that I wanted to make sure people take away. When we look at now what we're doing with our great community college system, it was under the Wilder administration that we did the framework for the articulation agreements that recognize the fact that people need to have the ability to successfully transfer the credits that they get in community college to four-year institutions, or to move through that process to get the necessary certifications, which is also very important right now when you look at the fact that it's much more cost-effective for students to maybe go to a two-year institution, a community college, for the first 2 years and then transfer to a four-year. They can save money in doing that. The framework, the articulation agreement was started under Wilder administration. Also, during the past General Assembly session, one of the major accomplishments of the governor and the General Assembly was putting in additional money to basically send back in the K-12 system to jurisdictions, school divisions, extra money based on the number of free lunch students that they had, which is really a question going at the disparity issue, providing equal access. Well, that program started under Governor Wilder. When we had the budget crunch, we decided one way of making sure that we were able to get money directly to school divisions was to send monies back based on the number of free lunch students. That was an idea that was conceived by my then Deputy Secretary, Suzette Denslow, who is now the current House Clerk. So I just want to make sure people understand that that program, which was supported heavily by the governor and the Legislative Black Caucus, initiated under Governor Wilder. Also, he took a leadership role as far as equal opportunity in higher education, making sure that our institutions put as much emphasis on recruiting presidents and faculty members and administrators as they did on recruiting power forwards to go to those schools. And a lot of accomplishments were done as a result of that. For example, the University of Virginia was in the process of getting approval for its new Darden business school, which was a very eloquent, statuesque, as we refer to it, feature that was going to appear on the grounds. And they had to get approval from the Secretary of Education to go forward with that. And we raised with the university at that point, well, we thought that the Darden School could do a much better job as far as recruitment of minority faculty and students, and we'd like to see some progress made in that arena. As a result, there were some changes made that would not have been made had it not been for the fact that the governor felt that everybody had the opportunity, needed to have an opportunity to be involved in our higher education system. The same thing was true, and one of the podcasts that Dean Gooden mentioned, he did was with Julian Bond, who was a visiting faculty member at the University of Virginia. That took place because we made a call to the University of Virginia and said, there's a gentleman we think would be a great addition to the faculty out there. Why don't you take a look at Julian Bond? That was the kind of leadership that you have to exhibit in order to get some of these things done. He also moved to decentralized oversight for higher education in the Commonwealth of Virginia, which is a major step forward and has had a tremendous impact on our higher education system, which is one of the best, if not the best, in the nation. But the governor pushed forward on that. Also, with respect to higher education, it was under the Wilder administration that financial aid was made available to community college students and to part-time students for the first time. A realization that those students needed to have the opportunity to have the support of the state going forward. Also, I want to mention that when Governor Wilder came in office, there was a cabinet position that was for the Secretary of Public Safety and the Secretary of Transportation. The governor had the foresight to recognize that transportation was going to be a major issue for Virginia going forward. And so he took steps to split off the transportation portion to make a separate Secretary of Transportation. And that is now one of the most important positions in the governor's cabinet to address those issues that are so very important across the Commonwealth. Recently, you've probably heard that there was some activity related to the Center for Innovative Technology, which when the governor inherited that agency, it was under the Education Secretariat. Because of the governor's foresight, we moved to take that entity out of the Secretariat of Education because it was supposed to be focused on supporting research in the Commonwealth. How do we basically commercialize research that was taking place at our higher ed institutions? The governor decided that we needed to move that entity into commerce and trade because it was really an economic development vehicle for the Commonwealth. And in the past General Assembly session, that was created the Virginia Innovative Partnership Authority, which encompasses CIT and other agencies throughout Virginia, which have something to do with research, and put them together in an economic development vehicle. We also think it should be mentioned, it was alluded to, the governor talked about his efforts as it relates to South Africa. During his administration, he issued an executive order encouraging our universities' foundations to invest in South Africa-free portfolios so that they would not be supporting the apartheid government in South Africa. And that set an example for other states to follow as we went forward. We also looked at opportunities to make sure that we focused on school safety, which is an issue that I know is very, very prominent today. Well, the governor convened a conference on school safety and made a number of recommendations, some of which were implemented at the time and others are now still being addressed, relating to providing alternative education opportunities for students who have disciplinary problems, to looking at how discipline is rendered in our school system so that it does not disproportionately fall on certain students, to make sure that when a student has a record of having been in trouble, that if that student transfers, there's a recognition or notification to other school divisions that that student has had some issues in the past and that they needed to be made sure that they had the kind of alternative education opportunities that were important. Also in the area of higher education, the governor focused on the fact that we needed to have partnerships between our private institutions and our public institutions. Prior to his administration, there had not been very many partnerships in that area. And we encouraged the various institutions, both public and private, to look for areas where they could work together and form partnerships, because the overall goal was how do we provide a better educational opportunity for the citizens of the Commonwealth. And that was something that is traced back to his administration. And to pick up on a related issue to that, when I mentioned earlier the student aid situation, that was also the forerunner of efforts now within the Commonwealth to make sure that our dreamers have the opportunity to receive in-state tuition in the Commonwealth of Virginia. The next step for that, once again, building on the seeds planted by the Wilder administration, was to make sure that those dreamers who are TAG eligible are able to receive TAG funds so that they too will have an opportunity to further their education. There are a number of other things that I'm hopeful that once the state library is able to catalog all of the governor's records and look at a lot of the things that got started during his administration, that people will recognize how impactful that administration was on the Commonwealth and our betterment here in Virginia. And so that's one of the things we wanted to have come out of this panel, was to make sure that people realize that there are great opportunities to do more research on what actually happened under Governor Wilder, and make sure that people recognize those accomplishments. At this point, I'd like to ask if there's anything else any of the other panel members would like to say in response to anything anyone else has said, or if we should just move right into entertaining any questions from Dean Gooden. Anybody have anything else they want to say? Any observations? If not, Dean, do you have some questions that may have come in over the transit?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Secretary Dyke, and we can certainly go into questions. So we'll start with a question that we received from Reggie Brown, who said, as we witness the appointment of over 200 conservative judges nationally during the current administration, what impact should we expect this to have?
Okay, well, Judge, you want to take that, or is that one you'd rather have us answer?
Well, yeah, it's probably better for you to opine on my colleagues on the bench than for me to.
Okay, well, I think that's one of the issues that I'm most concerned with, because having a court system that you know is going to be fair and look at what the Constitution requires, and that will make decisions based on what the Constitution says and what was intended, is very important. And we've seen the importance of having a court to be able to rule on these things. For example, the reference to Brown versus Board of Education. We wouldn't be sitting in these positions now had it not been for the Supreme Court looking at the Constitution and recognizing the fact that all of us are entitled to equal rights under the Constitution. And so to the extent we're moving in a direction where we're putting people on the court who are not willing to look at the Constitution as a living instrument to see how it applies to our lives today and to overturn some of the decisions that have come from the past, it's very important. And that's why having a president in place who is faithful to the Constitution and who understands the importance of having a fair, balanced court that makes decisions based on what the law requires and what the Constitution demands is very, very important. So hopefully that's another reason why people hopefully will turn out to the polls in November to make sure we have somebody who is making those judicial appointments, at least at the federal level, of people who deserve to be on that court. But Mack, I don't know if you want to opine on that, or Verbena?
Jim, I would, in the sense that I think it's just been so clear, the agenda, particularly in the number of judges that have been appointed during this Trump administration. And I think it started when we had President Obama, who had an opening at the time, and they would not even have a hearing for his appointment. So it is an agenda. I believe that it's real clear, but we I think have to be very, very mindful of what's happening on the federal level and how many appointments that have been made that have been they were not entertained by the Senate. And now that the Senate has the majority control, there's a very, very conservative look. And again, I think what we're looking for in judges are people who are going to be mindful of the change in society. Yes, look at the Constitution, but not be political, and have qualified judges. That's one of the concerns that we have to be dealing with now. We want to have qualified judges on the federal bench, particularly because they have lifetime appointments, and you don't really get to address it much. So I'm hoping that, as you said, the election is going to bring about some changes because it's crucial. It's crucial, I believe.
Yeah,
that we have.
Here in Virginia, which was the home of massive resistance, if we did not have a court system that said that's just not correct, and that they did what they could to dismantle that, the court can make a huge difference in the quality of life that we all have. So I think we're in full agreement on that. Mack, did you want to weigh in on that at all?
Well, the only thing I would say is I hope that people appreciate and I think it's been said before, I may be reiterating it, but I think it's important the fact that Governor Wilder opened the door for all races to be active and participate in in politics and be elected. Before him, as you well know, people didn't give him very much chance of prevailing, but he believed he could win. And in fact, he went out to Southwest Virginia, where everybody said, well, you can't go to Southwest Virginia. He went out to Southwest Virginia and he won those people over. So I think that point is that he opened the door. And that's so very important for people to understand. He opened the door for my opinion, President Obama, because he showed that he could do it. And particularly when he came into office, they were saying he will never succeed. He's a spender. He will spend everything we got. He was facing a $2 billion deficit, and yet we dealt with that. He, in fact, for 2 years running, Virginia was the best managed state in the United States. So I think that speaks to his ability.
Very good. Dean Gooden, another question?
Yes, so we're doing this event in partnership with Virginia Union University, and when we think about some of the best legal scholars that we've had in America, many of them have been produced by HBCUs. So if we think about Thurgood Marshall, Spotswood Robinson, Governor Wilder, Secretary Dyke, yourself. So could you speak a bit more to the role of HBCUs in terms of producing and the contributions that they have made to the advancement of legal studies in the United States?
Well, yeah, you mentioned the fact, if you looked at all of those legal legends that we consider, the HBCUs played a significant role in educating all of those. As Governor Wilder mentioned, when he went to Howard Law School, Spotswood Robinson went there, and Thurgood Marshall, a number of other great legal legends went to HBCUs and got their training. And in fact, in Governor Wilder's situation, he couldn't go to a law school in Virginia. In fact, Virginia paid for him to go to law school somewhere else, and that's how he wound up going to Howard, because people recognized that the law was so very important for social change. That's certainly what motivated me to go into law, because we saw it as an instrument of social change, and HBUs have certainly played a key role in that. But they've played a key role in a number of other things, not only lawyers, but if you look at doctors and other professionals, they have produced more minority professionals in those areas, far above their percentage of students. And it's really important that we continue to support HBCUs. And that's one of the things that the Wilder administration certainly focused on, was supporting not only our public HBCUs, Norfolk State and Virginia State, but also the Virginia Unions and Hampton Universities, and at the time, St. Paul's College. Those HBCUs played a significant role in the Black community, because there were no other opportunities in a lot of cases for students to get a higher education. And they were absolutely essential. And they continue to have a role and a mission today. And we still need to do more as a state to make sure that we give them the resources and tools that are available, so that people will have an opportunity to enjoy the HBCU experience. But also, we need to focus on the fact that these HBCUs are providing education in a number of other areas that are attractive to all students. And that's one of the, I think, change missions of our HBCUs, as now an additional mission, is to be a place for people to go to. For example, if they want to get a good background in cybersecurity or in education or in nursing or whatever their professional is, those schools need to be supported in the same manner as all of our other institutions, so that they're able to achieve their mission and make sure that students are able to attain their full potential. But Judge Gregory, you've obviously have gone to HBCUs, so you can speak to that as well.
Yeah, I was about to say, Dean, no way I could sit still and hear that question and not make it very clear. Virginia State, my alma mater, awesome opportunities. And I think also too, in Governor Wilder, we talked about this person, I think the last time we spoke, people like Dr. Calvin Miller down there, who's the head of political science, being active in terms of legislative, getting people together and being instrumental in bringing about progress. That's how it was connecting with Governor Wilder, teaching it as an adjunct professor at Virginia State. And I wouldn't have had an L. Douglas Wilder teach me in any other place in this around the country. And these opportunities are daily presented and encouraged and fostered at historically Black colleges. And just look at the numbers of how many African Americans who actually graduate from college, and look what percentage comes from far beyond the percentage that attend historically Black colleges. Look at the number in terms of graduate nationally. That speaks for itself, and the speech is in volumes, no question.
No question. And but you reminded me of one additional point, is that we still have to continue to push our public institutions to do even better to provide opportunities, not only obviously at HBCUs, but at our non-HBCU public institutions, because they can do a much better job of providing more access to low income, to minority students, to others, to international students. And just for the record, in Virginia, our private institutions do a better job of educating a higher percentage of minority students or disadvantaged students in our public institutions. So there's still work to be done. And that's where the executive leadership comes in. We have got to continue to keep that message in front of our schools to say, you need to do a better job to make sure we get more diversity in our student body, in our faculty, and administration, and to move forward. Dean, another question?
Yes, our next question is from Latoya Gray, and it's directed at Judge Askew. She writes, when I was an undergraduate in the Wilder School, I was inspired by Judge Verbena Askew to write a research paper on the need for there to be a change in the judicial process in Virginia. The last time I checked, the states of Virginia and South Carolina are the only states in which judges in Virginia are primarily elected by legislators in the General Assembly. Considering the pressure for change in criminal justice, which I believe extends to the structure of our judiciary within the Commonwealth, do any of you see any potential for change in the way that judges are selected and appointed in Virginia?
Judge
So,
Askew?
Judge Askew, is you made an impact.
I'll tell you what happened with my appointment. That may give you some idea about there maybe needs to be something different. But back in, I guess, 1995, when I was appointed, the process was you would get recommendations from the bar, the local bar associations, and they then would send it to their legislators, which would primarily be your legislators in the area. Well, if the local bar didn't support you, then you were not going to be reappointed. So the process I used was I just bypassed the bar. I knew they were not going to support me. I was basically the first Black female circuit court judge appointed in the state of Virginia. So I knew that wasn't going to happen by going through the bar. So I just put together all my opinions as city attorney, and I met with every legislator in Virginia that I could meet with. Well, the legislators appointed me, but during the process, it was real clear how political it really is. Now, you've got to look at the options. Do you want to have elected judges? I know they do, for example, in Louisiana and some other states. Or do we want to continue with this process that we have? I'm certainly would be open to some kind of change, looking at how political it is. And some judges are influenced by the politics, meaning that if they're on the bench and they know they're serving for 6 or 8 years, then a politician could go in chambers and tell them and talk to them about a case. It's done And I think that there has to be something to keep that from happening if we can figure out a way to do it. But right now, it's very political, and if we can come up with some other way, I certainly would be receptive to that.
Mack, did you want to speak to the question of the governor's role in appointments, at least as it relates to Virginia judges?
Well, I think that Judge Askew has actually hit upon the point that it is a very, very political process. And I think that if it could be leveled out to where anybody, no matter what their race, color, or political affiliation, which is very important, could be appointed, then I think that that would be great. Governor Wilder was very, very adamant about having equal opportunity for everybody, and he did a lot of talking, a lot of discussing, supporting Black candidates for governorships, and I think he had a lot of influence in doing that, and he still has a lot of influence. So.
Very good. Another question, Dean?
Yes, there was a follow-up question about HBCUs to ask if any of the panelists could speak about the funding proportionality that HBCUs receive compared to predominantly white universities.
Well, clearly there's more that can be done, and I have to disclose, I think you may have mentioned that I sit on the board of Norfolk State University, and that's an institution that we were very successful in the last General Assembly to get some additional funds, but there is a need for even more funds, I think, to go to our HBCUs because they traditionally have been underfunded. HBCUs, Virginia State and Norfolk State are in the midst now of trying to move up to what is referred to as a level 2 amongst our higher ed institutions. And there's going to be a need for some additional funding in order for us to accomplish that. So there's still a lot more that needs to be done to support our HBCUs because it's over the years, they've never been supported to the level that they should be. And in Virginia, it's still a priority. It needs to be a priority, and we need to continue to push on it. But we also need to push to make sure that we get adequate funding to some other institutions that also serve. For example, the community college system is in need of even more funding now, especially now with the emphasis on workforce development, the fact that a number of people can get good, higher paying job with a certificate or an associate's degree. You don't necessarily need a 4-year degree. We need to better fund our community college system to make sure we have an option and alternative for students. We also, and I put on another hat, we have for years underfunded George Mason University, which is now the largest public higher ed institution in the Commonwealth of Virginia. But our funding formula has not reflected the fact that it is such a rapidly growing institution. It also, by the way, is the most diverse public university that we have in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And it is providing great access to not only minority students, but international students and others. And so there are some funding inequities that we still need to focus in on. And once again, it goes back to executive leadership from the governor leading the charge to say, these are things that we must focus in on and go forward. So yes, there is more to be done, and we're going to be doing all we can to see that that funding is put in place.
Dean, can you give me just 30 seconds to say, so we're honoring the work of Governor Wilder way before he was governor. A lot of people don't know this. I don't have time to unpack the history, but in short, he's helped save Virginia State. When it was questioned about moving their land grant status to another school and looking at their liberal arts program, would have been a death knell, but because of his keen mind and incredible heart and courage, he used it against him. The whole idea was in the charter that doing Plessy in terms of this fiction of separate but equal, it was required to have a land grant status under Morell Act. And that saved it. And that was Governor Wilder. People don't realize it. So it's so many things, Jim, that I'm glad that you're getting and digging into those crates in the archives and that the true history, so that those will come in the future and will say, what you mean by these stones? Stones that are hewed from very dark and incredible treacherous quarries by Governor Wilder. And these stones mean something that our young people and generations need to know, that he helped build those stones. An institution exists now because of his great work.
You're absolutely correct. And we can't overemphasize the fact that we hope that once those records are made fully accessible, that people will look at it and people will understand the full history of what Governor Wilder was able to accomplish and get started in his administration. And it's very important that every Virginian be aware of that as we go forward, because he has been a great role model for all of us. I can assure you that I wouldn't be doing some of the things that I'm doing had it not been for the fact that he gave me opportunities. And there are many people out there who were given opportunities. But the key point is that we're standing here on the shoulders of others, and we need to make sure we keep the doors of opportunity open for those who come behind us, so they will have even better opportunities to succeed and to move forward. And that's one of the tributes I think we can pay to Governor Wilder.
Well, I think we're going to have to leave it there. We're almost at the bottom of the hour. I want to thank Secretary Dyke, Judge Gregory, Judge Askew, Mr. McFarlane for an outstanding panel and reflecting on the legal and the administrative victories and accomplishments and challenges of the Wilder administration. I know I speak for everyone in saying we all learned a lot. So thank you so much for this excellent panel.
Thanks to the great panel. We appreciate it. You're giving us this opportunity, and thanks to everybody. And remember, as Governor Wilder said, if the thing is right, the time is right. So take that away.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thank you, Dean. I enjoyed it.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I just want to remind all of our viewers that our day is still young. We have 2 more outstanding sessions. You see them listed on your screen. We're going to take a lunch break, allow you to grab some lunch, catch up on your email. We will reconvene promptly at 1:30. This former session, we were able to really look at some of the accomplishments, people who had worked with Governor Wilder for many, many years. We're going the complete opposite direction after lunch with our student panel discussion, where we're going to have young people talking about the importance of civic engagement, students from both the Wilder School at VCU as well as Virginia Union University. So please come back, support our students, support the future as we continue to reflect and build upon the legacy of Governor Wilder. Have a great lunch break.